and then we'll take a very short break and then have a reflection and a question and answer. So this is the reflection on universal well-being, and again, that's page 41. We'll do that in English. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their actions and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts, they will be the heirs. So coming into a sense of awareness of your experience. This might be a simple feeling of heat in the body or coolness. Sound of a truck. Wind on the face. Feeling of your clothes on your body. Experience of sitting. All of these things are in awareness. Our minds may begin to think. Boredom can set in very quickly. So we just keep coming back to this awareness of our experience. aware of any tension we're carrying in our bodies. It's helpful to be aware of our posture, keeping the back straight, but not so rigid that it's uncomfortable. And try to be aware of our heads sitting on our necks. We're not too slumped over. We can be aware of tension, particular muscles in our bodies. It can often be carried around the shoulders. Our faces are often a source of tension. Relaxing the muscles around the eyes. You can be aware of your hands. Are you clenching your hands at all? Are they relaxed? So this is the way we learn about awareness. Learning how to tune into the experience of having a body. You can choose the body as a whole to observe that while you're meditating. If you've never done this before, I highly recommend it. Just imagining your whole body from the top of your head, the soles of your feet, the entire feeling of that. One way to do that is to imagine that the breath that you feel is affecting your whole body. So as you breathe in, you feel that breath movement going down to your fingertips, to your legs, to your feet, up into your head. As you breathe out, you can feel that entire breathing out of the body. can think of breath as more like energy or movement. If thoughts arise, it's perfectly fine. It's what the thinking mind does. You're just gently bringing it back to awareness of the body. You might even think this thought is really important, but it isn't right now. So you keep gently bringing yourself back to that awareness. Breathing in and out. Just examining what that feels like. That's all you have to do for the next 20 minutes. So just keep reminding yourself of that. Asking yourself, what is this experience of the body? And there's no answer to that. There's no thought you need to generate, but it's just coming back to this awareness of what it is you're experiencing. Continuing to return to awareness of your experience. It's helpful to notice the end of thought. When you're aware of your body, you can notice that you're not thinking. And then a thought might arise. And eventually you catch this and you come back. And notice at the same time the end of thought. The more clear you can be aware of the end of a thought, the easier it is you can become aware of the beginning of thinking. And before your mind moves into those thoughts, you can come back to your awareness of the body. take a break for a few minutes, stretch your legs, and come back for reflection. was talking with Venerable Gino today about some of the tasks we have to do, and he said, oh, the countdown to departure has begun. And I've noticed this tendency in my own mind to get quite activated about deadlines, worried about getting something done. So many of you know that Lumpur Pasano and Ajahn Kurundamo are coming, and tomorrow will be 2 weeks. They'll arrive in 2 weeks. So that brings up a lot of joy. But there's also, speaking for myself, there's a fair amount of worry. Getting everything ready for them, making sure everything's clean and tidy. Part of Lumpur Pasano's practice and encouragement to us is often this repeated phrase of neat and tidy. So he encouraged the monastery to be neat and tidy, encouraged how we kept our huts, our robes, how we folded them, sewed them, how we ate. All of these things are to be done with a sense of mindfulness and carefulness, neatness. So then, the prospect of them coming back, worry. Is it neat enough? Is it clean enough? So for myself, that tends to be a habit of mine that I'm very aware of. But it doesn't mean that just because of the awareness of worry and fear, anxiety, it doesn't mean it goes away. It can just keep arising, and then it's how I react to it that, with the teachings of the Buddha, my teachers, and so they've taught me, how do I deal with that? And so there is a sense of skill that we're generating in terms of how we learn to deal with these kind of go-tos for ourselves. What it is that we tend to have as a difficulty for ourselves. Some people it might be desire. It might be something like that. We feel desire. We feel that we might be people who want to get things all the time and fulfill our senses. Or we can be kind of feeling that things just aren't right, sort of an aversive tendency. I don't like it. I don't want it. And then there's another tendency which is sort of like slothfulness or laziness or dullness, and that moves into sleepiness. And then, as I talked about, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was doubt. So these are what most of you might know of as the 5 hindrances of the mind. And a hindrance is something that keeps you from something else, right? It's sort of like having something tied to your foot. You can't move. Or not being able to get out of a room. The doors are all locked. So that hindrance is keeping us back from a potential we have towards something that's more skillful or something that's beneficial for us. So like with this example, I think of how, I'm worried about several tasks that we have to get done in the monastery, which are specifically like we've decided to clean up the walking paths and power wash them and sand them and stain them, and it sounded fairly straightforward at first, but it's very tedious actually. It takes a lot of time. And so there's worry about that. It's kind of worry, how am I going to get this done? I have 2 weeks left, it's raining on Friday. But I notice that whenever I'm actually doing the things that I'm worried about, it always turns out all right, even if it doesn't. It's just sort of like, it's fine. And then I can be worried about, well, it's not good enough. But then eventually the mind moves on from that, finds something else to worry about. So that comes up in our minds, and my own sense of it is how it's spoken of in the suttas is like restlessness, or worry, flurry. Also remorse goes into that same area. We're thinking a lot. We can't kind of stop our minds from moving. It's quite an energetic feeling. It's like kind of the mind bouncing like a ball. And there doesn't feel like necessarily control we have over it, almost like the ball's on a slant. It's just getting away from us. And so when, like in meditation, I don't know if you have experienced this so much, but it's just a sense of real concern about something that we've done in the past or we're going to do in the future. We might not have enough time. We might have upset somebody. There's this kind of anxiety that can be felt. And it's a very charged feeling. And my own sense is that when I move into that hindrance, I start to worry, then the mind starts to run away, and it actually gets quite activated. And I notice that the proportional time that it takes to get activated is much shorter than the time that it takes to calm down. The time that it takes to calm down can be hours. Just like you get worried about something and we get what's known as worked up. And we work ourselves up into this kind of worry, and then it just moves and moves and moves. And it's comical because if you tell somebody else about the particular worry you have, they just can shrug their shoulders and think, why are you worried about this? It just doesn't seem like that much of a problem. And what's ironic is like, in seeing that it takes us so much time usually to calm down from that, we still can move towards this tendency. The tendency to be worried, tendency to feel anxiety. One of the natures of the experience of anxiety is that it's not actually so much tied to one particular thing. When we think about, if somebody says, oh, I feel kind of anxious right now, it's not always about, I feel anxious about this particular, my dog being sick or whatever it might be. There can just be a general feeling of anxiety, and then just insert object. And then we find, oh yeah, that's what I'm upset about. And we can get distracted and then just move into another object, whatever it is, the next thing that is. Most of the people in this room feed us. Sometimes twice a week, and it's a very beautiful act, but I could imagine can be some anxiety attached to it. Is it enough? Is it the right thing? Are they going to like it? Do I look like I'm starving? I'm not. So, yeah, and we're very well taken care of, but yet that anxiety can come up. It can be kind of a fear around something not being good enough. And it's a bit sad because in doing something like that, like I'm explaining, doing something so wholesome like that, feeding us, it does come up to the receivers as I mean, I know what it's like because I did the same thing when I was a layman at the monastery and then on Agartha. It does, anxiety can come up, but to those receiving, it's kind of, I mean, there's all kinds of emotions that come up around that, like, well, there's no reason, we're really happy. You know, there's a lot of happiness and joy that comes out of it. And so yeah, there's not necessarily a reason, like it's not rational. It doesn't have to be rational, you know? And that's one of the things that we kind of blame ourselves around. It's like there should be this should be understandable, and somebody else shouldn't think that I'm being irrational in my own fears and worries. That's why we're sometimes perplexed. We explain something to somebody else and they just don't get it because they have their own personal go-tos, their own personal worries and fears, and they're usually quite different than ours. And I can see for myself that yeah, it can grade on others because of these differences that we have, because people do have different sense of what's worth worrying about and what's not worth worrying about. So like I've talked about, like, you know, married couples, I'm sure must think, why does he think about this thing so much, or she do this or that, worry about this thing that I have no concern about at all. And so it's quite helpful to kind of be aware of, similarly to how I was talking about in the meditation, if we're aware of how thought ends and the space that exists between thoughts, the more that we understand that, the more that we can then get a deeper clarity around the arising of thought, which is similar to the arising of anxiety, the arising of fear. We can kind of know it like, there were a lot of earthquakes last year at Abhayagiri, and I've never experienced this many earthquakes in my life. I mean, it was just, they were not every day, but very common. And so what I noticed, though, was about a half second between each earthquake, and many of them were aftershocks or pre-shocks. I would actually feel a slight, or hear something. It was kind of in between feeling and hearing a vibration. And then all of a sudden the earthquake would hit. And I started to pay attention to that more and more, so that the mind wasn't then caught off guard. It was, oh, here comes an earthquake, and sure enough, there it was. And we're trying to actually do that with our practice. We're trying to really try to catch ourselves before we move into an activation or an energetic quality that's unwholesome, like anxiety. So it starts to come on and we feel it, and then we can kind of, okay, this is where we're using our awareness. We're being aware of that feeling instead of the automatic movement that we normally make into our typical habits or addictions or whatever it might be. I'm going to worry about this now, you know. So if we kind of get more to the ground of the experience in our awareness of fear, of anxiety, of worry, then we say, oh, I got it, I get it, it's coming on now. And it's not, and we have to remind ourselves it's not helpful to react in the way that we're used to. And this can be helpful in words. Okay, don't go there. I don't need to go there right now. What I can need, or what is helpful, is actually just the awareness of this. It's not going to kill me. I'm not going to solve anything, for example, by thinking about it. But I am, if I just am aware of it, it's not going to get amped up. I'm not going to get in this kind of frenzied, energetic path that I usually can move into. So while I was meditating this evening, I was kind of, these things were coming up. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this and that, and the ajahns are coming, and then I thought quite comically, like, well, so what? You know, what is the ajahns are coming? Like, is it like World War III or something? I mean, is there some like serious panic that needs to happen? Like death and destruction is going to occur if I don't get everything ready if we don't kind of get the monastery in perfect order. And it's not, because, well, what happens actually on the 23rd is Venerable Dhammawaro and Venerable Gino are departing on that day. And for some reason in my mind, I actually created this false, like, just divide. Is like, oh, that on the 23rd, something's going to happen. You know, something disastrous is going to occur, which is, you know, the two monks, they'll be here, actually they'll be here 2 extra days, they'll stick around. And then Lumpur Pasanaj and Kurundamo, Anagarika Thai will arrive. And nothing happens next. I mean, it's just not a big deal, it's not a problem. So the mind's just completely created this false scenario. And sure, we're going to do our best to get things ready, but it's just not that important. But it happens to be just, I've inserted an object into the worry I have, or the fear, anxiety. And then I can get quite worked up about that. And then it takes a lot of time to calm down. So I'm not sure if any of you have seen this in yourselves, but if you ever have a anxious or worried experience, then that can kind of stick around for a while if you haven't caught it, if you haven't dealt with it. And so that's why the hindrance itself has to do with kind of this flurry, this moving. And I haven't even talked really about the past, because then we get into our past remorses and we start worrying about those and how we can try to resolve them and what we can do about them. And I have to apologize to this person, and I hope I never do that again. And then we get into this kind of anxiety about ourselves, and we're not good enough, and I have to do better. And all these people think I'm just a no good, terrible, horrible person. And we get stuck into this sort of reality that doesn't actually exist. Because again, if you talk to somebody else, they're like, I don't think of you that way. So this, one of the ways that we can, not only as I've been talking about, try to be aware of the inclination of this energy moving within us, within our minds. We also want to try to use right effort to deal with it when it has taken over our minds, you know, when we are feeling really worried about something. And essentially that's what most of us are used to. It's coming back to our sense of the body, you know, because we want to go to the thought. We think the thought's going to resolve the problem. If I just worry about all these things I have to do, then they'll get done and there's no problem about it. But it doesn't work that way. Actually, ironically, as I was mentioning before, if I just do the work, then the worries go away because the work's not that difficult. It was all the worry that was difficult. And actually, it's quite enjoyable. And strange that I would be worried about something that when I'm actually doing it, when I'm sanding a deck or I'm doing something physically with the body, it's quite pleasant, it's enjoyable. And then I can reflect how strange that is to be worried about something that I find is quite pleasant. So that's, there's a sense that I think is, we want to have around our own personal tendencies with this hindrance. Some people can look into whether they think about more about the future or the past. And you can think about in your own meditation practice. Some people just think about both equally or randomly, but others can really focus on the past. As, you know, just a lot of this remorse comes up, and or it can be just that fretting about the future and the unknown. And for me, the interesting thing about the future is the future we don't know about, so we want to exert control over. Right? We want to kind of figure out how to make it so I get it all right, and I don't have to kind of worry about this thing anymore. And it's about this anxiety for me, for example, about the unknown. I'm not sure if everything's going to get done, if it's going to work out, and what's going to happen. And then with the past, you think, well, that's already happened, so what do I need to control? Well, we are afraid that we might repeat the same mistakes, or we're also afraid that what we've done in the past has future repercussions for us that we can't possibly deal with. I was talking about on the Friday talk about people were asking about how to deal with sort of a sense of remorse and reconciliation. And I just said, well, there's not always something you can do about it. Maybe somebody's died, or they don't want to talk to you anymore. If you've had some big mistake you've made with somebody, you can't always do something about it. But what you can do is you can forgive yourself. And that's the important thing, is to try to work on forgiveness. And so when we're experiencing remorse, we want to try to understand that, well, everybody makes mistakes, and we're a part of that. We're not excused from that, and it's normal. It's not like a new or novel thing to fail or make a mistake. It's just part of life. And if we think that it isn't, then we're unfortunately teaching ourselves in the wrong way. Because again, if you aren't willing to make mistakes, and you don't want to make mistakes, and you think that they're a problem in your life, then you can't learn anything. You can't learn without making mistakes. That's exactly how we learn. I mean, there are other ways of learning, but for me, that's really that's what teaches me the most. Oh, I don't want to repeat that again. How do I get into that problem in the first place? And so remorse can be resolved in terms of also allowing ourselves to have made the problems that cause that remorse in the first place. You know, I shouldn't have done that. That was really stupid of me. I'll never do that again. These are all kind of things that aren't really quite helpful for us. We want to think sometimes, I'm really happy I made that mistake, because it helped me see clearly now how I can kind of improve or change the situation in the future. But we can kind of get more, we can have an aversive quality around that. Like, I never want to do that. I don't want to feel that again. I don't want to fail again. And unfortunately, that doesn't allow us to learn. It just creates more fear around our potential to keep failing. So forgiving ourselves is more a sense of like, yeah, it's okay. It's all right when we make mistakes. And if other people have problems with them and they can't forgive us, that's their karma. That's their work. They have to deal with that. That doesn't mean that an apology isn't warranted, or expressing remorse to somebody isn't warranted. That's often very helpful. But if you think that's going to resolve your problems, it's just not. It's our own forgiveness that helps us. Because if we're looking for somebody else to forgive us for what we've done, then we're just locating the resolution of these mistakes we make in somebody else's opinion of us. And there can be some people who are very forgiving, and some people who are not. And so you might have, unfortunately, been dealing with somebody who's not very forgiving. But that's sort of their problem to work with. So in that way, we don't want to locate the resolution of our remorse in another person. We have to come through it in our own understanding of ourselves. And that's where that forgiveness comes in. We forgive others, and we forgive ourselves for what we've done. And that, I don't know how many of you that resonates with, that word of forgiving myself. Does that feel like a good thing, or is there defensiveness that comes up with that? Because many people I know, and including myself, find that that's a hard thing to do. Just the feeling of like, oh yeah, it was okay, I made that mistake, that's fine. It's sort of it seems like more like a rare quality that people have. So in dealing with that kind of anxious energy or remorseful energy, or that sort of activated heart, think I'm trying to encourage a sense that not only an awareness of that is important, but how it is we're dealing with that, and how it is we're seeing it, and how it is that we are resolving that within our own minds is quite important. So we have to see it, but we also have to do something about it. And there's skillful ways to do something about it, and there's unskillful ways. And just like doubt, the resolution of anxiety is not in thinking about it, in terms of thinking that if we keep worrying about it, it's gonna somehow resolve itself. So in the example I was giving, it sort of goes back to that whole, well, just do it, don't worry about it. And it's easier said than done when someone worries, but it is just like, oh yeah, just sanding a walking path, staining it, not a problem. So I think those are just a few words of reflection. And if anybody has anything they wanted to ask about or comment about.
At the garden party, I had this experience of somebody didn't respond to me very well.
Mm-hmm.
And my immediate reaction was, what have I done wrong? And then I walked away thinking, should I find out what I did wrong? Sometimes should I resolve this? Or since I don't know, maybe I did something wrong. I don't think I did anything wrong, but maybe I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then I let it go because I was having so much fun with everybody else. But there was that few minutes where I carried it around with me at the garden party, of this experience. Like, somebody here doesn't like me. Well, I don't know what to do. I can't, there's nothing I can do about it. At least not now, maybe in the future. I had to drop it. And then, of course, later I found out this person was having extreme difficulties in their life. Extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And well, maybe that's what it was. But I still don't really know. And I'm going to just have to set it aside because I'm not very skillful in walking up to somebody and saying, do you have a problem? What did I do wrong? Or I'm not sure I could have accepted whatever the answer was on the spot. You know what I mean? And I might have. One doesn't really ever know what's going on in somebody else's mind. But I would prefer the first explanation was there's something really going on in somebody's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how are you? It didn't seem like we were doing very well. And of course, I personalized it earlier. Because that's what the mind does.
I think you've stated something. I don't. It sounds pretty good. Is there a question?
No, the Dhamma project really seems to be that everything's occurring in your mind, but there might be something occurring in somebody else's mind too. And it occurred to me as you were telling your story. At some point, one does have to, I suppose, deal with it. Or carry around this weight. Every time you see this person for the next, 20 years, you wonder.
Well, yeah, so there's, so the question is about, having said something not intending offense. It seemed that there was offense. And then how or whether to drop this, and in this situation it was dropped, and there was a continuing on in the particular space at this garden party, and then finding out that this person that seemed to be offended was actually having quite a hard time in their life. And but how to deal with that, how to deal with having said something that we're not sure was unskillful, whether we check in with somebody or not. And I think we need to, investigate it in ourselves, so we try our best to assess the situation. Did I say something that was wrong? Did I actually intend harm to this person or in what I said? And if we genuinely don't, then it doesn't mean that we don't talk to the other person. And that's not what I was implying with what I was saying. I was just saying that there's some situations we can't actually deal with it. But we are trying to resolve things in ourselves. I mean, in a situation where somebody might be used to somebody else saying something offensive, if we try to change ourselves and really act in accordance with like right speech, restraining from harming another through our speech, it might take a really long time for somebody to see that in us, and it would take a lot of effort for us to do that. But that is actually, I think, the superior way of engaging with our practice. Because let's say you go up to the person and you apologize, and they say, oh yeah, I was kind of insensitive what you said, but I'm having this problem, whatever, and maybe you do have a heart-to-heart with them, or maybe you don't. Maybe they're not open. But what's important in what I'm trying to say is that doesn't necessarily resolve in our hearts what our experience is and the mistakes that we make, and how we're trying to kind of continually like reset and start anew. And so that's like the important part is in our own hearts. And we can have incredible transformations with how we interact with others based on how we purify our own minds and our own kind of morality, And I'm not saying purifying in terms of like more of a sense of like destroying all of your old actions or something like that in terms of making yourself pure, but it's sort of a sense that you're cleaning things out by creating a new sense of what is the right thing to do. So for all of us, I think there's ways that we move into unskillful directions in our lives, and we keep doing it over and over again. And that other people are around us and they pick up on those things. Well, you keep saying sorry, for example, let's say, for all the things you keep doing wrong, and eventually it's like, well, okay, I understand this person is saying sorry, but they don't really mean it because they're not changing. So it's actually change that is the apology. It's change that is the expression of regret and remorse. It's really like when we devote ourselves towards goodness, then other people eventually see that. And if they can't, that's their own problem. We can't do anything about that. This doesn't mean that when we genuinely have misstepped, we shouldn't apologize to somebody. I think it's always helpful to apologize. Sometimes even when we weren't the person who misstepped, sometimes it's they misstepped, but they can't see it. And if there's so much animosity, then sometimes it's better just to say, whatever I did, I'm really sorry. Because even if we know we didn't do anything, their perception is that we did, and they can carry that around. And sometimes we got to kind of think it's not about me, like being right. There also has to do with like harmony, and maybe I can help somebody out by just acknowledging that maybe there was something wrong I did do I can't see. And so it's helpful to do that, but that's not, I think that's secondary to kind of the devotion we have towards non-harming, the skillful behavior we can try to pick up towards being good to others, being aware of our speech, being careful. And so that's where I think, that's what I'm trying to suggest. There's something more superior in there. And the longer term that we engage with that, over our lifetimes, then that's where people are going to trust us. They're going to have a sense of trust around us, and they're going to, oh, I actually can have a feeling this person has no harm for me in mind. They're not going to hurt me. They're not intending to hurt me in any way. I can trust them. I can say something to them, and I know they're not going to turn around and use that against me, or they're not going to abuse me. And so people only get that over a long period of time of knowing another and seeing that this doesn't occur.
How can we aspire to do our best without being driven by feeling that who we are and what we do is never good enough?
How do we aspire to be the best or do the best?
To do our best.
To do our best, despite feeling that no matter what we're doing, it's just the worst.
It's not good enough.
It's not good enough. Well, welcome to the human condition. Yeah, this seems to be. I don't know so much about raising children, but if anybody figures out how to get their kids to think that they're happy and good and they're good enough as they are, I think it's just very normal. It seems to be the suffering of human life is a sense of discontent, not feeling that something, it doesn't have to be us, but something in our life is not good enough. If you can just recollect any time of your day where you've had that, During the garden party I was sort of, I didn't put out tents. We had these nice big tents that we put out. I thought, well, 20% chance of rain. It hasn't rained much. And man, it really rained. I mean, it wasn't like pouring weather like I was used to when I was growing up in Chicago, but it was just raining and then it stopped and then rain and then it really started raining after we got our food, all over the food, and I think I said to somebody I don't remember. It was something about I know it's rain and it's unpredictable. We're not in control. But it's that it's raining right now that's not okay, And so that's really that's not embracing contentment. Because contentment is not just I can deal with it most of the time. It's even in this moment when we think we can't deal with it, that's where we want to bring up a sense of contentment. And so when we do feel that we're not good enough, that's an actual opportunity for us to dig into something that's very unpleasant, that's very painful. The feeling of not being good enough is quite pervasive, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily see how pervasive it is, how constant it is, that there's just this sense of I'm not good enough, or the situation's not good enough, or the people that I'm speaking to are not good enough. And it can be depressing because of how pervasive we might find it. And I think that what's depressing about it is it can almost seem tyrannical. Like we're carrying this unwelcome being around with us, who's constantly whispering in our ear, I told you so, you're always wrong. Even when you think you're right. And that's the hard part. So I've mentioned Lumpur Suchito's book before called Unseating the the inner tyrant. And I really like that word, unseating. So we need to really learn how it is that we can undermine that voice that we might be quite used to, that's telling us that no matter what we do, there's nothing we can do. And that does come from an awareness of the body. That is an experience we can have in our own bodies. Because it doesn't come with a feeling of happiness or letting go. It comes from a feeling of being present with dukkha, being present with discontent. And that's painful. I mean, it's really painful to actually confront that, because when we do confront it, we might find, but it's true, I'm not good enough. And so that's really a habit. That's a habit we have. And the reason that it seems so difficult to uproot that habit is because it's so powerful. It's something that's just pervasive, and it doesn't end, and it seems like it's just constantly there. So it seems, it's a little bit tricky, but I mean, some of the things you can use is skillful thinking. Asking yourself, is it really true? Is it true that I'm just an unworthy, hopeless person? Have you done nothing right in your life? And so we want to kind of challenge that voice as well. When we follow the precepts, for example, that's a very easy way, when we've decided to follow precepts, to say, oh, have I actually fulfilled the precepts? And when we have, then we can pat ourselves on the back. We can say, oh yeah, I didn't kill anybody today. Thank goodness that you're a person who didn't actually kill somebody. And if you are, then you got to work with that. That's your present comma. But if you aren't, then think about what it might like to have been, to have ended another person's life, and what that feels like. And you say, oh, I'm glad I didn't do that. Maybe I'm not that rotten. But of course, that also means that we might be equating our actions with who and what we are, because even somebody who has taken the life of another, they're not rotten. They've just made a wrong decision in life. So it's important to also know that when we have made grave mistakes like that, that we're not continuing to make them, and we want to note that in our minds. Let's say you get upset with somebody who you're close to, which is very common. You make a misstep with a loved one, with a child, a partner, a parent, and that there's an acknowledgement of that. And there's an understanding. Okay, this wasn't the right thing to do. But as I was talking about before, we can resolve not to do it again. And even in that resolution, we can gain confidence, like, oh, right, I can't be such a lousy person in life if I'm actually intending to not do something harmful again. So we want to kind of remind ourselves in a way, like ask ourselves, is it really true? What is the evidence we have that we're not good enough? Really try to think of it. And if you can think of all that evidence, well, yes, but ask yourself about good things that you've done, and try to remind yourself of that. There's a thing that is done in Thailand for older people where sometimes children of older parents will make a photo album for them of like them having done good deeds, like their parents putting food in monks' bowls or whatever it might be. Some kind things, giving things, just anything you can think of. And at the end of the life, when the mind might be sinking sometimes, this book is brought out and it's encouraged, like, have a look. These are actually the good qualities you've done in your life. And they're reminders, they're real reminders, like, oh yeah, I guess I'm remembering the wrong things. And it's very easy to remember the wrong things, because that can just be an inclination of our mind. So that kind of sense you have, like, I can't believe I was so stupid to do that. You can think, well, I can't believe I'm so intelligent and amazing to know that that was a stupid thing to do, and now I can do something about it. We tend to just focus on the negative. So it's important to try to uproot that tendency, and it takes work. It takes a lot of effort. It really isn't easy to work with the mind, and that doesn't mean we don't do it. The Buddha said that the most difficult thing in the world is to tame one's own mind. He said it's more difficult to tame your own mind to the degree of being released than it is, like to realize enlightenment, than it is to conquer the entire world. So it's not a small thing that we're doing, and it's understandable that it can be really frustrating and difficult at times. But that doesn't mean we don't do it. The hardest things in life that we engage in are really the things that give us the most rewards. And it's that quality of continuing to endeavor when we don't want to that really cultivates that sense of patient endurance, that sense of patience that we just continue to have over and over and over again. And that's a perfection. One of the perfections that's pointed out, and one that the Buddha talked about quite a lot, was patient endurance. In terms of Ajahn Chah, our teacher, he would talk about this as what's very important in the practice of the life of being a monk or being a nun. It would just be patient endurance. And the Buddha called that like the supreme austerity. It's one of the supreme actions we can engage in, because we sometimes don't want to be patient. So we need to extend that to ourselves and just try to be, as patient with ourselves as possible as we continue to work with things that are quite challenging. Is there anything else? Anyone? The precepts? Yes. Oh, okay. So there's precepts that monks have, nuns take, and then there's precepts that people who are more living in the world would take. And so the 5 precepts are, the first one is not to kill, not to take the life of any living being. So most people don't have a huge problem with that with human beings, but they might with a mosquito, or cockroaches that are living in the house or something like that. So it includes all living beings. There's not stealing, so not taking what isn't given. So that could even be a sense of somebody who's in your family. You might say, well, I ran out of toothpaste, I'll just use their toothpaste. So there's a bit of care and concern around that. But that being said, you might know that that's fine with them. But that would be sort of a higher level of the sense of what isn't given, if it hasn't been offered. There's sexual misconduct, so any kind of sexuality that's harmful. So a lot of times we're talking about cheating on people, but it's really anything that one could think about that's really harmful behavior in that realm. There's speech. So with speech, one of the ones that's kind of the main one is lying. So it's not engaging in lying, and that's pretty tough when you actually think about it's just no lying whatsoever. And so I can find that challenging, if I'm saying a joke or something to somebody, and the joke, sometimes jokes involve setting it up as if it's a truth, but it's not. And you don't intend for the person to really believe you after you've said the joke, but there's a moment where they do, and they might think, is he serious? And then they don't trust you because they don't know when you're serious or not. So it's just being very careful with how we speak to people about, do I know something to be true? Like if I say, John's in the kitchen, somebody asked me, but if I said, well, actually, John was in the kitchen 30 minutes ago when I saw him last. I wasn't intending a lie by the first statement, but what I said actually might not be true. He might not be in the kitchen. So it's really being careful with our speech and being aware of how, kind of assessing, like, what am I actually saying? Is it truthful? But also there's harsh speech, gossip, slandering. Those are realms that we have to be very careful of. Are we trying to separate one person from another by saying something to, like, so-and-so said this about, let's say, like, somebody, like, absolutely cannot stand a racist person. They just think it's the most, and they get so filled with hatred, and they say, oh, so-and-so is a racist. So you're kind of trying to divide people up. But there's also just kind of general gossip or whatever, even without that sense, so it's being aware of that. But then there's harsh speech, speaking to somebody harshly. That's the realm of speech, and that's one of the most difficult precepts to keep for people. And the fourth one isn't actually labeled, those are 4 moral precepts. And the 5th one isn't actually a moral precept, but it's not taking any drugs or alcohol. And that would be in the realm of really not saying, well, it's okay if I have 1 glass of wine. It's just 1 glass. Because then one will lead to another. So for example, for the monks' rules, we wouldn't have anything that would have alcohol in it. Or if it did have a very tiny amount, like a medicine or something, we shouldn't be able to detect it at all. But it's also just any kind of, sort of recreational drugs, not talking about medication. The reason that that's not moral is that these other 4 have to do with often like harming others through our behavior. And somebody might harm themselves through, for example, drinking alone, but that's not considered the same. It's not in the same realm as like harming another person. But the reason it's included in these 5 hindrances is because if you break the 5th hindrance, it's likely, drinking, using drugs, it's likely you're going to then break the other 4. So it's sort of the gateway into breaking those others. So a lot of the people in this room have taken those 5 precepts, and they renew that sometimes, but they'll take them for a lifetime or periods of time. And it doesn't mean they're never broken, but it means that you start anew. You try to start again, just like I've been talking about. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
So if you stub your toe and swear, that's wrong speech? Because it's harsh speech? You mentioned harsh speech, huh?
Well, I mean, yeah, in a way it is, like, because then it's sort of like the drugs and alcohol. It's like, then you're going to swear at somebody else, And I've definitely noticed that myself. If I do something that makes me angry about something I've done, and I say something, then I'm likely to say that in front of another person, and then even if I'm just angry about something I've done, I might say it in front of them, and then I might then move into doing it against them. It doesn't mean that it's always going to then just be in the realm, because if I'm angry, if I feel angry about something I've done, like stubbing my toe, then when somebody stubs my toe, I could get just as angry with them. So yeah, we want to try to, I wouldn't say that it's the same thing. It's not the same thing, because we're talking about harsh speech exhibited towards another, but I'm just kind of bringing it out into a broader perspective, like, yeah, you want to kind of curb it all the way. Yeah. Okay. Well, it is 8 o'clock, so it's a good time to end. If all goes according to plan and I continue to be healthy and live and get transportation and the studio hasn't burned down, then I'll be here a couple more times. And then Lumpur will start teaching here on the, when is it? I think it's 29th. 29th. Very much looking forward to having him here, and also the benefit they'll have towards you. So have a good week. Perhaps we'll see you again.